Hello. Hello, Miss Audrey. Miss Audrey, are you with us?
No.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today's event. We have a guest speaker today, Miss Laura Cano, who's also our guest speaker. She's an artist, and she's like many other things. I'll let her share those things with you. Um, Today, we're celebrating the Day of the Dead, and I'll also let Miss Cano pronounce it for us. The other I can't pronounce it. You'll have to help me. I always butcher it. I am going to learn it though.
Yes. So,
and
Dia de los Muertos.
yes, Dia de los
Wh-
Muertos. That
mhm.
is it. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and um, let's welcome Miss Laura Kano.
Hi, all. Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure to speak on something that is so dear and close to my heart. And so, Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, what is it? And I know that it's become such a popular imagery, right? You see skeletons and people painting their faces, and because it's so close to Halloween, people think, oh, that must be the Latino or Hispanic or Mexican, or they put all these things attached to it. That's what it must be. But no, it really isn't. It really is a traditional and exclusively only to Mexican culture. So if you're thinking Colombia or Honduras or stuff, even though those are Latin countries, and they may have a form of something similar, it's still not what we know as Day of the Dead. And so Day of the Dead is a combination. People think, well, does it have a religious meaning to it and stuff? It really started as an indigenous uh, celebration. And what is Day of the Dead? Well, Dia de los Muertos uh, is really a celebration of those that have passed on, whether it's your relatives, and sometimes people even think of their pets, right? Something that's very close and dear to their hearts. So, what do I mean by celebration? And you see people putting altars or um, different skeleton candies or things out there. And really, what it starts off as, you have someone you want to honor. Say, for instance, your grandmother has passed away. You usually do not try to celebrate Day of the Dead for your relative or friend until you feel comfortable enough not to be mourning. Because it really is about celebration. It's the one day that they can come back and visit you, and not in a ghostly way and not in a spooky way, but in a way of remembrance, right? And so you want to, what they call an altar, and I think that's what confuses people in thinking that this might be religious. It's an offering. So you want to make sure that, gosh, you're going to spend the day celebrating this person that you love dearly. So what are you going to do? You're going to put up their picture. You're going to build an altar or offering, ofrenda in Spanish, um, with things that remind you of that person. And there are different levels of making an altar or an ofrenda. The bottom layer would be with flowers and you usually see marigolds. And the reason you see marigolds is because this is the time that marigolds bloom, right? And so when the indigenous people did this, and then the Spanish priests came up um, into those communities and just tried to convert the indigenous people to um, their religion, they realized that it was very close to All Saints' Day. So they would report back to their upper people that they had all these people converted because they were celebrating All Saints' Day, right? But they weren't. They were celebrating their version of Dia de los Muertos. So this is how it starts and how it begins. Now, I would say in the last 10 years, it has just bloomed to this pop culture kind of um, event. And so people get confused as to what it is. So if you can just remember that a celebration, it is a celebration for those who have passed on. So going back to the altar part or the offering, you want to put all those things that are wonderful. So on the floor, when you put the marigolds, what does that mean? Well, marigold lights the way. So you're welcoming your ancestors to come back and you're lighting the way with these beautiful flowers so that they know where to go, right? They're not, you don't want them to go next door. You don't want them to go, to another country. You want them to come to where you are welcoming them back. So that is why also we say you don't want to be mourning them. You want to celebrate them. You don't want to be crying. Who wants to come over if you're just like crying and being sad? Nobody likes that kind of, you know, um, when you visit people, you don't want to go to a very sad house. So then you want to put the next level up is the foods. So you'll see in traditional Mexican altars, you'll see that they put out these big bowls of mole, which is a very traditional kind of sauce that they use with chicken, or they can use it with beef and stuff. And they put this out um, for the their ancestors so they could eat. You see fruit on the altars. You see pan de muerto, and pan de muerto uh, comes in. Now it's so commercialized. You can even find it in boxes and stuff. But it is the traditional, and if you go to a Mexican bakery, even now you can find it. It's a bread made um, for this specific time, and you put that on the altar, and you want to put all these goodies that they love. Maybe they were a fan of chocolate, or I know that if anybody ever builds an altar for me, there'd be lots and lots of chocolate and stuff, because it is what you remember of that person. And in building this, you also are remembering the stories that go with it. Maybe it was your grandmother. Oh, grandmother used to make these delicious cookies, or she used to make, the sopa, which is, some kind of foods that they like, some noodles or whatever it is that they're like, right? And in building it, you're also remembering, because you're having this enormous interaction with you and that person that has passed on that you're honoring. The next level that you would build in tiers would be the pictures. You want pictures of them. Who are these people that you're honoring? Now, one altar can welcome several family members. It doesn't have to be one specific person. It could be 20 of your relatives, or 20 of your relatives and friends, or whoever you want to honor, right? And sometimes now you can see these are more in community, right? Someone in community has died, someone in government has died, someone who has served the church has passed on. So you also want to include them, right? And welcome them back. And you want to say, look, we remember you, and look how wonderful it is to remember you. Let's tell the stories of you. So if you think of people, especially now during COVID and stuff, that we weren't able to maybe go visit our relatives or friends or people who have passed on because we were restricted by COVID, and you could do this little celebration now, and do it as being part of that, is honoring that person. Um, it is not restricted to anyone to put these altars up. Um, it doesn't, you don't have to be Hispanic is what I want to say. You could be of any culture. And if you look around your house, I think you will notice that maybe your grandmother has passed on, or your grandfather and stuff, and you hold on to his picture and or her picture or friends, and you start to put little things that you find of them, maybe a necklace, maybe it was this little trinket or little toy, and you kind of set it up. That is kind of what the altar is, right? It's things gathering to remember. And what a great way, of celebrating and remembering those that have passed on a life well lived for them. Um, and then the final part of the altar would be an arch with flowers, and that's because it's the archway and it is the welcoming between heaven and earth, right? So that is real specific to how to build an altar. But I think that if you give yourself permission, because people get really hung up with what needs to be in an altar, or what do I have to do, or what does it represent, and all this stuff. It really represents all those things you can research and make an altar that is traditional, but that should not limit you to building an altar. It shouldn't limit you to thinking, oh, I can't do this, or I can't celebrate because it's not my culture, or it's not this. It really is open to the idea of remembrance and celebration and stuff. So um, you notice, especially during this time, there were several festivals around Houston that were celebrating Day of the Dead, and they had mariachis, and they had altars, and they did community altars and things, and it was so joyful and stuff. And I believe that on today is the day officially of Day of the Dead. I think now, because it landed in the middle of the week and you want more people, they are going to have the city of Houston is actually going to do a big parade with vendors and all this stuff at Sam Houston Park uh, this Saturday. The parade's going to be fantastic. It's going to be it's the very first time that the city of Houston has actually put up a parade, you know, uh, kind of like the Thanksgiving parade, but now it's the Day of the Dead parade. And hopefully it will be continued on uh, throughout the years. But it is the very first. And I know that we're kind of antsy to get out and stuff, and it's going to be outside. It looks like the weather's going to hold. So, if you can try to make it, there's many interpretations there. There'll be foods and different things. But I think that that whole idea of how people are celebrating, right? Um, it was said that the sugar skulls were made for the children to put on the altars. If you've seen sugar skulls, um, you get you get to make, here's a mold. You get to make them out of sugar and decorate them, and kind of you decorate cookies, right? There's a recipe for it. Of course, not a lot of people are doing this. It's somehow more easy to go buy one if you can find them. But it was so that the children weren't afraid of death, right? So the people knew that this was could teach their children that it was a transition. It was just part of life, and you can transition. You didn't have to be sad. Um, so you'll see a lot of that, and then you'll also see um, people doing. Now this is the Papel Picado. If you've seen it in celebrations of Mexican, traditionally it's made out of paper, but you can see how commerce has caught up to us, and now it's made out of plastic. But it represents to the altar wind. You have the elements of earth, wind, fire, all the earth elements that the indigenous people celebrated. So when you see the papel picado put up at the altars, you understand what it is. Now, also in traditionally in in very indigenous communities throughout Mexico, they still go to the graveyard and they clean out the graves, and they clean out um, on that day, and they actually built the altar there at the gravesite, and they have picnics and things like that. And it sounds kind of weird, but it's kind of a way of including all those people that have moved on and moved forward. Um, there has been several movies now around that, and I think the most popular one is Coco from Disney, that gives you kind of an idea, right, of what this is. And um, so it is a way of thinking how, especially in a place like the United States where we're so many different cultures, how do you incorporate and bring these cultures in, and traditions, and bring them in and kind of make them fit our lifestyles now. Coco is a very good example of that. It's 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 uh, it's a different way of teaching our children about our traditions, and in a fun way, because it's not a it really isn't a spooky movie. It's a very so. And before then, there was another one. There was another movie called The Book of Life, and there's also an animated movie, and that one's also been um, traditionally shows a lot of the culture and what Day of the Dead is, and um, any of those basic traditions and stuff. And I love the fact that now a lot of other groups of Hispanic or Latino people have also incorporated them in their celebration. Um, that they don't have to be of Mexican descent. So I'm going to kind of pause here. I see there are a couple of people online. If I'm going to give you the opportunity to show your faces, your beautiful faces, and if you have any questions, we can answer them now. Is that a no? I don't know if you have to unmute them or they have to unmute themselves. Okay. I see that she wrote that they don't have any questions. Um, I'm curious to find out from those participating why this particular subject was of interest. Is it that you wanted to learn more, or that you see it so often, or um, is it part of your culture? So yes, and I get it is a traditional knowledge, but it depends. Okay, somebody says I want to learn more. So specifically, more from historical point of view, or his do we? Oh, I didn't get that last one.
Okay, it's me. I said yes on the historical
Oh,
part,
okay.
Laura.
So yeah, so it says here your family come from Mexico City. So traditionally, I'm from the border of El Paso, which is Texas and Mexico, the Juarez area. So just like the United States, Mexico is a huge country. And when people say, "Well, why is there more Mexican Americans or stuff?" It is because we're just a bigger country that immigrated here. If you think of the size of Central America and all the smaller countries, you don't have uh, the bigger countries. The thing with like Mexico is that it had 27 different indigenous languages. And so you mix indigenous languages and then you mix Mexico being conquered by Spain and everything that has come. They too have gone through a great transition. So as you move closer to the borderlands, closer to Texas, well, we're just like Texas. You know, I've come from the state of Chihuahua, which is closer to Texas. Um, we're ranchers. We're big, tall people with cowboy hats and so if you were to cross, say, at any border of Texas, you would notice, hey, that looks just like Texas. Well, it is because we're so close. We're ranchers, cattle, and as you start moving more into the interior, then you start becoming more tropical, more indigenous. The people look different. They start to do more crops. So maybe it's more corn. It's more uh, fruits and vegetables and that they start to cultivate and things like that, and then further up into the Yucatan. So when you think of Day of the Dead in the border, we didn't celebrate it as much or as big as they do because we don't have that many indigenous cultures closer. We have throughout the mountains of Chihuahua, which is closer to Texas, we do have um, the traditional Tarahumara Indians, but they're more desert-like. They lived in the mountains, and then as you moved further up, uh, oh, I guess it would be down, not up, but down south. You have more people that live in more jungle-like environments, and when you think of Cancun or you think of all these uh, beaches and stuff and how tropical it is and all the fruits and stuff, and you see that the people are a little different. They're a little shorter, they're a little um, more indigenous looking. People from Mexico City, of course, are very um, cosmopolitan. They come from all over Europe. So it's a mixture of cosmopolitan and Europe, but very strong. You have all these great um, historical places there that you can go see. So Day of the Dead is celebrated in Mexico City with huge parades. I mean, huge, amazing that you think, oh my gosh, it makes our Thanksgiving parades look kind of small. And you see these huge skeletons and dancers and mariachis and indigenous dancing and all this great celebration, which is really, really cool, even for me. We get really excited about all that. It's also, as you move further in, is where you start seeing the embroideries of the indigenous people. And so, um, different regions. I know COVID has prevented us from traveling much, but if you haven't traveled to Mexico, there's more to Mexico than it's like many, many um, cultures put together in this big, big country. Um, so So everybody celebrates it a little bit differently in throughout Mexico, depending on background, depending where um, you grew up, how you grew up, um, and how it's celebrated. The thing is that when you have first and second generation people that immigrated here and are bringing now the traditions here, um, it has it is kind of really interesting to see how it mixes together and forms into something so uniquely part of this. I'm sure if you were to go to um, Iowa or I studied in Columbia, Missouri. Um, totally different, right? But you still have. I did go and did a presentation in Seattle because we had immigrants that had been on Day of the Dead. and then you had a conflict with me because it was like, well, no, 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 my mother said, my ancestors said, this was not the way, because it's tradition passed on, right? So you have a little bit of change within those traditions. And even at the University of Kentucky, I did a, you're thinking Kentucky, really? But there was a great interest in starting um, a form of Latino mixing of of cultures and traditions and things like that. It's kind of like the tamal. Everybody knows the tamal here, but when you travel through Mexico, the tamal changes, and then if you go into uh, Guatemala or stuff, it's totally different. And even for me, I'm going like, this is really a tamal, but it is because it has the same function. It is dough or masa wrapped with some kind of filling, and we use corn husks. They use banana leaves. Whatever is available. And I think that brings us to the point of whatever is available, right? So maybe we can't get a hold of a lot of things that are available to us here in the United States, but it we work with what is available to us. Now, if you want to see traditional um, altars built, Casa Ramirez on 19th Street in the Heights is a wonderful place to go and um, and actually view those different way of people building altars, and in a very traditional way. Um, I saw somebody say that they were a student from Vietnam and wanted to know other. I think that's wonderful that you want to learn about other traditions, but I guarantee that you will find something even within your culture that celebrates ancestries, that celebrates those that are have moved on or passed or left a legacy behind. Because this is really about preserving legacy, um, preserving your legacy, preservation of your culture, even though it might look a little bit different, might look a little bit um, enhanced because you've come to the United States and you might not be able to bring in some of the items that you would like to bring. Um, so we kind of move around that. Um, there is also, I believe, an altar at the Holocaust Museum that was built there for this time, and you can go view it before it comes down. I think it still will be up uh, till next. I'm almost sure it'll be up to the end of this week. There's so many other um, celebrations, and when I think back at people still asking, well, what is Day of the Dead, or stuff. And now everybody kind of knows. And even with my artwork that I grew up knowing because I'm of Mexican descent, um, the skeletons and stuff and all this stuff, I would travel, say, to New York. And when I travel to New York, there are more people of Cuban or Puerto Rican descent or Dominican descent. So they would look at me and say, "Why are you painting skeletons? That is so weird. What is wrong with you?" And things like that. And I would say, "Oh, okay." So also, it has awakened for me the knowledge of that. Just because we're lumped into some kind of you're Hispanic or you're this or you're that. Um, we also have to be sensitive that we are not all alike and we don't all celebrate exactly the same way. Um, that would be even in birthday parties with piñatas or whatever we want to do. Are there any other questions? No?
I have one. How long should we leave up an altar that we put up for a loved one?
Well, because you would actually start to build it maybe 2 weeks before this, and then the celebration would be today and the rest of the week, and depending on the day of the week too that it lands, and that's really a personal. I've seen altars left up years, for the entire year. So depending on the space that you have, was it a public altar in a public space? Is it a private altar in a private home? Um, you know, it really depends on you. There is really no time set. Uh, it would be nice maybe if you had all the food and stuff and flour and fresh flowers. Maybe it doesn't last that long. Maybe a week is is when everything ripens right to that time. Um, that's a good question for those, um, because it's kind of interesting how it you only see it for a short time during this time of year. The altars. Um, anything else? I think I touched on mostly all the tradition. Usually when we do this live, right, when we have the opportunity to be back, and I think we're all anxious, we would actually engage in a kind of a hands-on art project that we could do. And it's so hard to try to form some kind of art project um, during Zoom, right? I've tried different ways of doing art during Zoom, but it just never seems to totally be the same as to actually be there on hands doing things. But um, I'm surprised of, like, I went to Michael's and they had a whole um, Dia de los Muertos uh, stuff. So right now it would be kind of cool to go get some stuff now on sale and things. But Walmart had like an aisle of Dia de los Muertos things, and you start to see it more and more in different retail uh, stores of, these building these art projects and stuff. And I was going to. I usually have coloring pages or something that you can do. But I think what I would like to know is that, does anybody have someone that they would like to um, maybe not build a total altar for, but someone that they want to remember um, in this times, that they would like to know more about how maybe they can go about building an altar or doing a remembrance for that person. No. So I will share with you that it was this summer there at the University of Albuquerque, where they teach in the summer. They teach traditional medicine, curanderismo. It's in Spanish, and shaman stuff traditions, because they're situated in an area in New Mexico where there is a large indigenous community. I believe, I don't know if they're Navajo, or I'm not too sure of the right tribes that are there. But they do this one course in the summer that I participated in, and it was college students throughout the state of Mexico. Now they usually bring them into Albuquerque, but because of COVID, they couldn't. So we did a Zoom, and it was the most interesting thing for me, because I was worried, like, how do we Zoom all these kids? There was uh, 20 of them um, throughout Mexico. So if order to them to apply for this leadership program through the University of Albuquerque and through the Mexican Council, they first had to be of indigenous heritage. They had to speak Spanish. And I thought, what do you mean? They're from Mexico. They speak Spanish? But but what I realized is that a lot of these indigenous smaller tribes don't they speak their native language. And Spanish is actually their second language, even though they're Mexican and they live in Mexico. They had to have a 4.0 average. I was like, it was getting harder and harder. I said, "Are you really going to find these big kids?" They had to be able to have some form of connecting to the internet and zooming into these uh, sessions. So we held a week long session on leadership and what it meant to be um, indigenous and what it meant to be studying. So when I would ask them what they were studying, these kids are studying medicine and engineering and literature and all this stuff, mostly because um, in Mexico it's free to go to college, but you have to have the grades to go and stuff. And the idea is that if you train them, they could go back into their communities and share what they know. And when I think about what we're doing with the Day of the Dead and all this stuff, it really is sharing our traditions and what we know with our community here and now. So um, it was really interesting to see all these 15 kids from all over Mexico um, share their thoughts and their communities and how alike they were, just like my own kids, that are going to college. They had the same concerns, they had the same um, love of music or love of dance or love of culture. It was really quite uniquely uh, interesting to see um, the likeness that they had with our with our own kids. But in talking about Day of the Dead, and we talked about it, each one of them had a different take on what they and how they built it, how they built their altars at home, and how long it would take, and how it was either a community effort or a school effort because it is taught at school. Day of the Dead is taught at school, the traditions as part of their curriculum, and why the altars needed to build a certain way and things like that. So it was very interesting to for me to establish and include when I teach Day of the Dead and when we built an altar, the different ideas that they had and that they brought to me and they shared to me, and opened my eyes to a lot of other things that I was not including or involving in the traditions of what they had. Um, Even in the crafts that they made for those days, what kind of crafts they made, depending on the area they were in. So I think that pretty much covers it, unless anybody has any real specific question.
Does anyone else have any questions for Ms. Kana, Via or Haley? Okay. Um, Ms. Kano, can you share with us, you have two art pieces behind us.
Yes.
Can you share with us about those pieces or anything about your art that you do?
Well, and especially in these two pieces, we have a traditional um, kind of skull, but my son likes he has these funky little glasses, these mustache. It's kind of a yuppie kind of Day of the Dead kind of thing. Um, All my artwork is downstairs because I just finished a show. I don't have too many things up here. There might be one other. There's one. And so my artwork represents a lot on the feminine, a lot on the empowerment of the female, and also in tradition and culture where you have a lot of the imagery that is of my heritage and stuff like that. Um, this Thursday at the University of Houston in Katy, they will be unveiling one. I'm one of 5 other artists that did. Um, a piece of artwork that they will photograph and then um, I want to say it's a film that they put onto the window so that it looks like stained glass, kind of like what they do when they wrap a car. Remember when they do the advertising on cars and you see it's like a film, and they're going to do that. And I thought it was an interesting project because they chose someone of African American descent, someone of Hispanic descent, someone of Indian descent, someone of Arabic descent, someone of an indigenous descent, and asked the 5 artists to do a representation of their culture so that when the students walk down the hall through those things, they could see a reflection of of their culture, that they didn't feel so alone. Um, or maybe not alone is the wrong word, that they felt included, because it is an inclusion mural. That's what they do. And if anybody ever gets a chance to go out there, the other thing is that if you ever at the Heritage Society, there's a huge mural there representing Mexican American heritage as it relates to Houston. It's, so it's not Mexican American history, it's Mexican American culture and heritage specifically to Houston. So it documents when every when the immigrant people came as braceros, which means labor, that it was a, a contract between the Mexican government and the United States government that the needed laborers, and so it was legal. You go to if you were from Mexico, you go. They give you a card. You come here, you work and stuff, and then um, all the way down to when JFK, uh, uh, John F. Kennedy, came and spoke to the LULAC um, people the day before he went to Dallas. And you see film of it. If you can Google it, you can see film where even Jackie Kennedy is speaking to the group in Spanish, which is really interesting. Um, and so it documents all the people that made a difference in the community. Um, what I love about the Heritage Society is that this is only one part of the um entire documentation of Houston. They have a whole section on African American. They have a whole section on, I guess you would call it Texans, the first Texans that were here, um, and all the stuff that happened in this area and all the other cultures. So it's a good way to see Houston in a different light. Um, I just happen to have been involved with the Hispanic part of it or the Latino part of it. Um, and then if you go there, the presentations are amazing of what people have done in this community.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Kana. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning about the history and also learning about how uh, we can combine um, so many things to recognize our loved ones that we're celebrating. I want to thank our students and certainly thank the other student life coordinators for allowing us to host this event today. And if there are no further questions, then we'll go ahead and end our presentation for today. And again, thank you, Ms. Kano. Thank you, thank you. If you don't mind, leaving your contact information in the chat in case our guests want to reach you or have other questions, maybe an email that you have.
Mhm.
If you can share that with us. And then students, if you get a chance to, like Ms. Kano said, they're going to be out at U of H and Katy this Thursday. Also, there's some art up in um, tell me the name of the area again, Ms. Kano.
The
The mural, where the mural is
Yes,
located.
that's the Houston Heritage Society. So it's on Bagby Street and Ellen Parkway. It's on Conley Plaza is what they call. So if you go down Sam Houston Parkway or Sam Houston uh, Park, um, it's on one side, and then there's this tiny little where you see these little houses. Is just a tiny little piece of land, I want to say, um, that is called Conley Plaza, and it's just a beautiful little picnic area. If you haven't been there, it's really just crossing the street from the park on Ellen Parkway and Bagby. Um, you can enjoy a nice day, a nice picnic there. Um, and the mural is there along with other things that you can do through the Heritage Society.
Right. And then also, Ms. Kano was telling me about a parade that's going to happen this Saturday. That's a first time parade. It's a day of celebration, going to be in the city for us. Do you know
Yes,
where that's going to be
and
located
that
at?
and that again is Sam Houston Park on Bagby. And if you don't know where that is, that's downtown. I don't know if the Sam Houston Park, 1000 Bagby Street. And they're going to have different events there. If you've ever been there, there's like a little bike little place to bike and a hike, and there's different areas there. So they're going to be able to do. You'll be able to see presentations and food and things, and the parade will definitely go down that way. It will end there at and so I would say go early. It looks like it's going to get full.
Well, again, thank you. Thank you. And I'd like to wish everyone a rest of the great day.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye. Thank you, everybody.